So, I think you and I both agreed that this is sort of is our favourite Mozart opera, and in a way it kind of encompasses so many of the operas. Tell me why it's your favourite opera.
I think, like many of us, we come to Clemenza di Tito late, don't we? If you know Mozart operas, you grow up on the fizzy champagne da Pontes and the thrills and the seduction and the wit of those pieces. But I came to this through a production at ENO. It was, in fact, my first opera I conducted as music director at English National Opera. On first reading, I mean, the text on first reading, you don't get that same kind of energy as you do from Da Ponte with this sort of tightly knit Metastasio Verasco thing. But the more you burrow into it, the deeper psychologically it becomes. And I love that. For me, the music, it has this extraordinary combination of Handelian affect. Certainly Act One, for the most part, has that colour, almost, right from the first notes of the overture through many of those arias, especially Tito's two arias. By the end of Act Two, you've gone through all the pastel shades of Mozart's output. It's some of the last operatic notes he wrote, and you hear flute, you hear Così fan tutte, you hear bits of Don Giovanni, but it's really itself, and I adore it.
I completely agree. I mean, I think for me, what's extraordinary is these very long trails of very personal thought in the recits. You have this, these people sort of standing on stage, pouring out their innermost thoughts to, an unseen listener, so to speak. And then suddenly there's this, absolutely astonishing aria. And for me, I just find that contrast absolutely extraordinary. But I remember talking to a very good friend of mine who directs enormous events. He directed the opening of the Greek Olympics. And he said, in every event or opera or whatever, there's one very personal moment that absolutely takes your heart and it stays with you forever. And in fact, for me, there's probably more than one in this. I mean, there's some astonishing ensembles, but also everything's so personal. It's so incredibly personally directed to every single person listening. And I find that much more so than in any other of the other operas, in a funny way.
I really agree with that, actually, and I think about its relationship with Idomeneo sometimes, and with the great quartet in Idomeneo that Mozart sang Idamante himself, and his father sang Idomeneo, and at the end of it, Mozart was so beside himself with tears he had to dash out of the room. Sesto has that same quality, doesn't it? And to hear Adrian singing that so beautifully I find heartbreaking, even being involved in the performance. But I know exactly what you mean, and a lot of the work we've been doing with the singers and the orchestra, it's about finding that unique personality for each aria, for each character. And I would say more so than other pieces as well. I think there's a subtlety, and it's to do that Verasco text or this layering of things that's in every little piece of music. And it was so easy for people, since this piece has been written, to dismiss it as having been written quickly and not up to the level of others. I find that utter rubbish. I think it's a work of genius. It's varied. It doesn't stay in its own world in this strange sort of way. Act One is a different piece to Act Two, and rather like the two halves of Carmen are almost different pieces from each other. But it's completely wonderful to be involved with. It takes you over. We both said that we've had sleepless nights thinking about accompanied recitatives, and it's really the world we're in.
Yes, it's quite extraordinary. One of the things, as you know, we went through sort of incredible sort of hoops and loops casting this, because initially it was an international cast with 2 Americans and an Armenian, and then it had to be a European cast, and then we suddenly thought, wow, we can do this with a whole raft of young Norwegian singers. There's a lot of debuts, but that's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
You're right. I mean, what an extraordinary advert for this country and the music making in this country that we could get 6 homegrown Norwegian resident singers to sing all these roles are difficult. I mean, even Publio, this small bass role, they're incredibly challenging, not just in the arias, in the recitative as well, and they're all doing absolutely wonderfully, and they're great colleagues to each other and to the orchestra and me as well.
That's been very lovely to watch. No, it has been. It's just these characters are so defined. I mean, there's nobody trivial in this opera at all, really. I come back to this personal thing. Everybody has got something extremely individual to say in this opera. But tell me about, the orchestration is incredible. I mean, it makes me almost want to take up the violin again.
yeah, the inner voices of the strings are incredible. It's really, they're alive, and that's we've talked a lot about that within the orchestra. And of course, there's the great basset horn and basset clarinet obligato and the two arias for Sesto in Act 1 and Vitellia in Act 2, and that colour is heartbreaking, isn't it? It's something about the inner workings of his mind, isn't it, and the vulnerability of his soul. And the same for Vitellia. I always think Vitellia's aria in Act 2 it's the most amazing essay in loneliness of repercussions for a life badly lived, but at that point of remorse where you have to face up to who you are.
I mean, I think that's what's keeping me awake at night, actually. Those extraordinary, 3 bars that just tear your heart out, It's amazing stuff.
So we have to talk about the genius who's not in the room, Rodula, our wonderful director.
Oh, my word.
Somehow, I've never met her in person. Isn't that remarkable? But she somehow managed to embrace the whole process and all of us and all the singers and give them extraordinary characterizations and do it all from her house in London.
Words fail me on Rodula. I think she's a very, very exciting, very musical and very wonderful director. Anyway, I think it's going to be absolutely incredible. And as you're talking about Rodula, let's just have a few words about Ed Gardner, shall we? Because talking of collaboration and making things wonderful, I mean, what a team. And I think musically listening to you rehearse, it's just been extraordinary to listen. It's a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. It's wonderful to work with you and for the wonderful Bergen National Opera.
Thank you very much. See you there.